Hello, I'm Professor Shrek, and today I'd like to introduce you to a song I wrote about climate change. The music for the song is a beautiful classical piece called Liberate, written over 100 years ago by Gabriel Fauré, a French composer. The original words are in Latin and are about the end of the world according to fervent religious imagination. In my version, Liberate Us, I talk about a more realistic, potential and fearsome event, the gradual warming of the Earth by a few degrees by the end of the century. In this lesson, I will review the vocabulary and grammar of the lyrics of my song. Then I will work on the pronunciation and rhythm of the words and how they match the rhythm and mood of the music. Finally, I will intend to review the earth science and social impact of climate change. The song has 6 sections, which I've labeled A through E. The opening baritone solo, A, is later sung by the choir in unison. Each has its own melody with a moderate 1 beat per second tempo, though the dies irae, day of wrath, section C, is at a faster tempo. I really love the melodies, and it reminds me of my own Oxford days as a master's student, when I sang the bass part with the town choir. I trust that I'm a better singer now. It can only get better. As a famous psychologist encourages us, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. Okay, this is the section A part, and you can see that I've color-coded the words according to the parts of speech. So you've got verbs in red, adverbs, conjunctions, that clauses, noun and noun phrases such as subject, direct object, indirect object, preposition, and adjectives. I've left out articles and other things for brevity. Okay, let's read through. Notice I've stressed, put the stressed syllables in bold font. So it's where the beat goes. Liberate us from fossil fuels and all sources of CO2, for we know that greenhouse gases entrap the sun's heat. As a warm winter coat insulates, so the sea and sky will grow warm, and earth too. All earth will pay for the excess of the few. How dire. Okay, you can see I've put on the right the Korean translation given to me by Papago, thank you. And I've broken up the vocabulary of this part here. Okay, so we have liberate us from something. Fossil fuels. All sources. We know that. Something. Some fact. Greenhouse gases. Entrap. Sun's heat. Warm winter coat. Insulate. Sea and sky. Will grow warm. And earth too. All life will pay for the excess of the few. How dire. Okay, let's focus on the few language items. So we have the verb liberate. So an example is the Allied forces liberated Europe from the Nazis in World War II. And we also have the noun form of liberate, which is liberation. For example, we have the women's liberation movement, which was from 1960s to the 1980s, whose goals were equality for women and general human rights. And we have the conjunction and preposition for, and it has various meanings. So as a conjunction, it can mean either since or because. For example, it must be very cold outside, for there is ice this morning. Okay, so that's because. Or we have, as in the verse, liberate us from fossil fuels. For we know that greenhouse gases are bad, or because we know. It's giving the reason, you. And there are many meanings of for as a preposition. I suggest in the study tip there, so don't try to learn lists as such. It's better to study each case as you come across it, and you get to know them all in time. So meaning 16, according to this list, we have the meaning as in punishment of, bioro, as in pay for, which also can have another meaning. But here we say pay for means to suffer a loss or other misfortune as a consequence of an action, which can be your fault, your action, or somebody else's action. Okay. Someone paid for them. So we have, they paid for his impatience. Perhaps they had a car crash, and because of his trying to go very, very fast, they had a crash. Or all life will pay for the excess of the few. And this verse of section A has a particularly complex sentence, which we can see is nested. So we have liberate us from fossil fuels and all sources of CO2. For, because we know that, and then we know this fact. We know that greenhouse gases entrap the sun's heat. Now let's look at the music. So at the end of this document, I've got section or appendix 2, which has my full lyrics, including the Latin on the left, and it's got my version, and it's got the Korean translation of my version. So you can see we've got the beat. So I'll just read through the Latin version, so you can see the Libera me domine in de morte eterna. Liberate us from fossil fuels and all sources of CO2. In die ira tremenda, in die ira. For we know that greenhouse gases entrap the sun's heat. Okay, my meaning is different from the original. Quando cele movende sunt, quando cele movende sunt et terra. As a warm winter coat insulates, so the sea and sky will grow warm, and earth too. Dum veneris judicar seculum per ignum. All life will pay for the excess of the few. How dire. Okay, let's listen to the original Latin version of that section, and then we'll go through the metronome version of my song. Okay, here's the Latin version. I always find this very funny, these expressions. Wish I could sing like this. That's line 2. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy the song. Ignorance by fire, and in my version I say how dire. It's my sort of joke. Okay, let's go to the metronome version. So let's just try and follow along with the beat if you can. Okay. And green house gases and the sun's peak as a warm winter and sky. Let's change the subtitles. I've got a Korean version, so we can get the Korean up at the same time. Okay, John. Okay, that will help. Okay, section B. Okay, this is a lot shorter. Preserve the Earth's harmony as good stewards. Embrace solutions to climate change before it's too late. And we have the vocabulary here. Preserve, you preserve something. The earths, belonging to the earth. Harmony. Good stewards. Embrace solutions to some problem. Climate change. Before it's too late. And focusing on some of the grammar, we have preserve, which is the verb, and the noun form is preservation. So, for example, we have wildlife presentation, wildlife preservation, sorry. Steward, someone who actively directs affairs, a manager. Okay, that's the person, and the thing that he does, the action, is stewardship. And so we have environmental stewardship. And just focusing on one part of the grammar here, we have as. Okay, as here is an adverb meaning in the manner. So it modifies the verb embrace. Okay, let's go back to the music. Okay, so in B section, we have the choir singing tremens factus sum ego. Okay, and the soprano part sings a few other words as well. Ego et timio dum discussio venerit at que ventura era. And my words go, preserve the earth's harmony. As good stewards, embrace solutions to climate change before it's too late. Okay, let's go and listen to the guy singing that part, or the choir rather. So, Timio, number 2. Dum discussio and Dynamique. Era. Okay, the lyrics here say, days of heat stress, days of famine, one excess death for 4 Americans. Days of heat stress, days of flooding, all life will struggle to survive. And you can see the vocabulary here. We have days of something. So we have days of heat, days of cold, days of hunger, for example, heat stress, famine, one excess death, something for Americans, or I can say for something else, flooding, all life will struggle to survive. And okay, we just have the language focus here. So for the preposition we met before has another meaning here, number 8, according to dictionary.com. Here it means in proportion to. So for example, you could have 1 teacher for every 15 students. And the word excess means more than or above what is necessary, usual or specified. E.g., a charge for excess baggage. For example, if you're traveling on a plane and you have lots of heavy stuff to carry. Excess cardiovascular mortality across multiple COVID-19 waves in the United States from March 2020 to March 2022. Okay, that's from nature.com. Okay, let's go back to the music. Okay, we're on section C now, aren't we? And so in the Latin we have dies illa, dies ire, calamitatis et miseriae. Sounds like misery, so calamity and misery, very grim stuff. Okay, dies illa, dies magna, et amara valde. Okay, so Latin and Italian sound very beautiful languages. And my words here, days of heat stress, days of famine, 1 excess death for 4 Americans, days of heat stress, days of flooding, all life will struggle to survive. Dies irae, calamitatis et miseriae. And then to my version, So I hope you can see this. Okay, we're now on section D, which says, readiness and wisdom are surely needed. God help us to make some sacrifice for all the children. Okay, so with the vocabulary we have readiness, wisdom, surely. Something are needed, something is needed. God help us to do something, or God help us. Okay, they have slightly different meanings. So God help us, it's like a prayer to some deity, whereas God help us, it's like, oh, what shall I do? So like, good grief, that's terrible. Make some sacrifice for something. So for example, you make a sacrifice for your children because you work hard, or you sacrifice your time so you can you don't socialize, don't play with your friends so much, but you just focus on study for your future. All the children. Okay, on section D, so we have in Latin, requiem aeterna dona eis. Domine et lux perpetua luceat eis, luceat eis. And in my English version, we have readiness and wisdom are surely needed. God help us to make some sacrifice for all the children. And with my version. So for the next section, it's actually a repeat of the baritone solo, but it's the choir singing in unison together. Liberate Domine. De morte eterna, eternal death. Oh. Illa tremenda, tremendous. In the illa. Quando celim sud. Celim, heavens. Et terra, the earth. Dum, venomous. Judgment. Seculum is about the God. Per ignitum. Just stop there a second. So you notice, so the top line is the soprano and alto, and the tenor, the man's high part is singing the same note, and you've got the bass singing the D below it. So I've got D, what's it, D3 and D4, I think it is. Okay, so they're less an octave. Okay, so the last section we have the baritone sings, "Liberate us from fossil fuels and all sources of CO2." And the choir finishes with, "Let us seek a better way." Okay, so with the vocabulary, that first line is just a repeat of section A, and we have let us do something, haja. Let us go and see a movie together, or something like that. And we seek something. It's the same as seek something, search for, look for something, which is similar to find. Okay, so search, yeah, chaja bola was chata, like that. And going back to the music. Okay, so the baritone solo in section E says, "Libera me domine, de morte eterna." And the choir finishes with, "Libera me domine." And in my version, I have, "Liberate us from fossil fuels and all sources of CO2." And the choir responds, "Let us seek a better way." Libera me domine. De morte eterna. Libera me domine. So the baritone and the choir singing together. And at the end of my video, I've got some graphics, which I'm going to show you now. Now we're going to look at some of the science behind the song. Let us review the earth science concerning global warming and its potential impact on humanity and all life on Earth. So we have the line in section A, "We know that greenhouse gases entrap the sun's heat." So the Earth radiates all the energy it receives from the sun, but only 30% is immediately reflected back to space, like it bounces off the Earth. And the remaining 70% is absorbed and emitted later. So you've got the Earth there with the sunlight hitting the Earth, and in picture B we have the Earth radiating all the light energy out at various frequencies. Number two, greenhouse gases. Okay, greenhouse gases significantly block the emission of radiation back into space in the infrared part of the spectrum, where the bulk of the radiation is emitted. Okay, so on this diagram here from Wikipedia, we see these curves, and they're the theoretical radiation for the perfect black body at various temperatures. So on the right there, between 210 to 310 Kelvin, it's minus 63 and 37 degrees Celsius. The Earth is radiating naturally those frequencies. We can see these chemicals here, water vapor and carbon dioxide and ozone and oxygen and methane and nitrogen dioxides. They are blocking us, particularly the carbon dioxide blocks part of the Earth's emissions there, and also methane is absorbing a lot of heat there. So greenhouse gases insulate the Earth like a warm winter coat. So when you're outside on a winter day, it's freezing. It's like -20 or something like that sometimes in Korea. And then if you had no coat, you just be very cold. But if you have a coat on, it holds the heat in. Another analogy is like water flowing down the river. If there's a blockage or barrier in the river, then the water level will rise so it can pass over the impediment. Here, the water represents the flow of radiation to and from the Earth, so it comes in and goes out, while the water level represents the temperature. And so I've got two pictures here. This is Asan Daegyo, and on the picture on the left is after a flood, and the barrier has been dropped down so the water, they can let go of the water quickly. And so the water level of the river is low there after the flood, but normally the barrier is up, like we have on the picture on the right, and the water level is high. And so it's like an analogy with how the greenhouse gases absorb the heat, slow down the heat coming out of the Earth. In section B, we have the words preserve the Earth's harmony. So mankind is currently pumping around 9.5 gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere every year. Okay, we've got two pictures here. So on the left, we have pre-industrial. That means before the Industrial Revolution, and we have natural passing of carbon. On the left, we have is going from the atmosphere into the biosphere as plants suck up the carbon dioxide, and also it goes back out again as animals release CO2. Okay, so we've got that cycle, and we have a similar cycle on the right there. Carbon dioxide is being absorbed by the oceans, and it's also being released. Okay, so we've got some circle there. So that's before man started polluting the atmosphere. And also at the bottom, there's a lot of carbon buried in the earth in terms of like oil and coal and things like that, fossil fuels. But on the right here, we have the early Anthropocene, which means when we're around here. And it says we've currently taken 365 gigatons. Yeah, giga is like gigabyte, like this. That's 1,000 million, a billion. What's that in Korean? That's probably that's a sheepok ton of carbon. And every year, like we currently put like 9.5 gigatons into the air. And it's just building up there. So currently there's like 240 gigatons up in the air because we put it there. We burnt lots of fuel through. In section C, we had days of heat stress, days of famine, and days of flooding. And all life will struggle to survive. So Earth and all life is just starting to experience the consequences of this carbon. On the left there, we got graphs of the average global temperature. Okay, also 지구 평균 대기 온도. Okay, in the summer months between June and August, and we got, at the bottom you can see these lines here. It's from the 1970s, 80s, 1990s, 2010, and at the top there we got 2023. So we've got like a record year. It's getting hotter and hotter. So it's only it might seem not much, like a degree or 1.5 degrees, but it has an impact and effect. On the right there, we have the average air temperature. Okay, so this is the change compared to the average between 1980 and 2010. So it's like 30-year average. And the average, okay, it's a difference between that average and the temperature this year. So some places a lot hotter, like for example, in the Antarctic, in the south, down here, it's quite red. So it's up to 12 degrees. It's very hot, okay? So, but, and that's why the ice is melting so fast. Okay, so also in Greenland at the top there, and you've got some pink areas. So that's probably like 3 degrees, 4 degrees, but it's a big difference. And also over Turkey is a lot, it's quite red there. On the left there, we got hotter than July. In the United States this year, they had excess heat warnings, heat watches, heat advisories. Okay, so different levels saying, be careful. Okay, it's very dangerous for people there, especially in places like Phoenix and Los Angeles and Austin and Texas. And even Florida had that heat advisory. And on the right there, we can see the effect on life. So this is a prediction. Humans, we're fairly adaptable. We can deal with heat and cold places and warm places. But life struggles, like even small bacteria and things like that in plants. If the temperature goes up, there's less food. So in China, the predicted change in maximum yield, that's the amount of, in this case, wheat, okay? So this, there are other pictures for different crops like rice and maize. This is the tons per square kilometer. So in the middle of China, there's like something like 200 tons less per square kilometer. Whereas in the north of the country, they're actually producing more. In the blue areas, it's got more wheat in those areas. And there's similar pictures for rice. So it affects food. So basically, on the total, there's less wheat being produced. So people go hungry. Okay, you can imagine what that's going to affect. Social impact. Okay, all life will pay for the excess of the few is the line. By the few, I mean the minority. Okay, so I mean we're still talking about billions of people, but the population of the Earth, Ingu, is like 8 billion people now, isn't it? Okay, so there's sheep, Pal, sheep, ok, myong. Okay, so even if like China and America and Asia, well, I mean, China and America, they produce a lot, okay? So you can see China's producing so much CO2, okay? This is CO2 emissions. Okay, 국가별 지역별 CO2 배출량 gigaton, okay? So China's a big problem, okay, because they're putting lots and lots of CO2. America hasn't changed much at all in the last 30 years. It's still producing lots of CO2. Europe, you can see, Europe has actually decreased its emissions of CO2. So it's gone down from nearly 10 gigatons to maybe 7 now. So in Europe, they're trying to make them change. And India and the Middle East, they're increasing, they're producing more. So okay, that's the change by country and region. This is another picture of the same information, but this shows you per capita. Okay, what's that? That's 세계 1인당 CO2 배출량 연간 세상 백분위는 증가를 나타낸다. So the world CO2 emissions per capita, okay, color annual percentage increase. Okay, so like China is so America, what's that? That's like 13 gigatons per person. No, sorry, gigaton, 13 tons a year per person. So one American on average produces like 13 tons of CO2. I think also I've seen other numbers. So we're talking measuring slightly different things here. Okay, this is so China is almost half of America, or not quite, probably 60% of America, but it's still quite high. And the red line is the global average. Okay, so that's the height, and the width is the ingood, the population. So America has how many? It's probably like almost 300 million, 250 million, whatever it is. China has about 1.5 billion people. Okay, that's why it's so fat. So you can look in that area. So America is producing maybe a third. So China is producing 3 times more CO2 than America, according to that graph. Okay, so it's slightly different. Okay, this is 2020. And we've got other countries, we've got Europe, these long list of countries, Italy, United Kingdom, and South America and India is still quite low. And the color represents the increase. Okay, so the emissions. So I think like China's orange is probably like 2 to 3% more every year. Okay, so increases. So you can see America's is going down according to this one, and most countries, but still we have lots of difference. In section B, we had the line, embrace solutions to climate change before it's too late. Okay, so here are 4 IAMs. That means I am integrated assessment models, IAMs, like IAMs. Okay. Developed to simulate various typical climate policy. The 4th, which is RCP 8.5, they're often referred to as business as usual, i.e. no change. We just don't do anything. Was generated using high population growth, low technology progress, and a very large scale use of coal. Okay, so using those assumptions, they can predict the temperature change in the next few years. As a result, it shows the emissions increasing at a spectacular rate, which is scary, but not at all, not a helpful baseline. Okay. So we've got the time here. So we've got the line is just over 2000 there. And we've got these different models they made. Okay, so we've got RCP 8.5 at the top is predicting like, well, almost 5 degree increase. That's above the pre-industrial levels. Okay, but that's if we do nothing. 5 degrees hotter, 5 degrees. And those are different models. At the bottom is that if we do something really drastic, minimal, we can actually start to bring it down slowly. I've got a note here that in 1985, Carl Sagan, a famous American astrophysicist, planetary scientist, some might have read his book Cosmos. Okay, he testified before Congress in 1985 on the cataclysmic potential impact of greenhouse gases on the Earth's ecosystems from 2050, from the middle of this century. Okay, so even then, this is like 30 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Even then, with the computers they had then, they were saying it's going to increase like several degrees hotter by the end of this century, which is scary. Okay, so he talks about Venus. Okay, so actually Venus is very hot. It's like 400 degrees Fahrenheit, or I don't know what's that. It's like 200 or 300 degrees centigrade, I guess. And it's a very hot planet, and it's covered with CO2. But they can make their models, and they can look at the different planets, and they know that if there's no carbon dioxide, actually Venus would be a lot colder, even though it's so close to the sun, because it's losing the heat straight away. It's the atmosphere which holds in the heat. in section C, we had the line 1 excess death for 4 Americans. Okay, in the study of epidemiology, whatever word that is there, got the Korean there, the excess deaths or excess mortality is a measure of the increase in the number of deaths during a period and or in a certain group as compared with the expected value of statistical trends during a reference period. Okay, so we've got the Korean there. 사망률 변위는 폭염도 한파 등의 환경 현상으로 인해 일반적으로 죽어진 인구의 사망률의 시간 또는 일시적으로 증가로 나타낸다. Okay, so let's look at the wiki page quickly. Got it here. Okay, so actually, okay, so it's got an example here. So we can see in the, okay, so on the right we have a chart and shows the effect of COVID. So you've got the average mortality, average number of deaths in a year. So around the winter time, we have more people dying. In the summertime, few people. So this is cold weather, more people die. But because of COVID, we can see this big spike there on the right. Okay, that's because lots of people died because of COVID. So it's comparing with the average over this short period of time. Okay, many of those people are older people, and they'll die later, but they died earlier because of COVID. So in the same way, we talk about climate change. We can think about no global warming on the Earth until the end of the century. So it's like the normal curve. And we can say with climate change, and we calculate the difference in the number of deaths, we get a lot of people. They did some study. This is again in Nature Communications. The study is called mortality. Mortality is about death. The mortality cost of carbon. It says the analysis draws on public health studies that conclude that for every 4,434 metric tons of CO2 produced, one person will die, one globally. Okay, so that's a lot of CO2, and like 4,000, let's say 4,000 metric tons of CO2 will kill one extra person in the next century. Okay, one extra person will die because of that extra CO2. And that sounds a lot, but if you calculate, okay, so we're saying maybe China produces like 10 gigatons. A Chinese person produces 10 gigatons of carbon a year. So over, I can say 80 years, that's 80 gigatons, okay, or something like that. So if you calculate that, okay, so the research published in Nature Communications illustrates the vast disparities and differences in emissions generated by people's consumption in different countries. Okay, so Americans, Chinese, Koreans produce a lot of CO2. Like somebody living in Africa, not very much. It says, while it takes just 3.5 Americans to create enough emissions in a lifetime to kill one person, 3.5. It would take 25 Brazilians or 146 Nigerians to do the same. Nature Communications 게된 이 인구는 전개에서 다른 나라들에서 사람들의 소비에 위해 발생하는 배출량이 엄청난 차이를 보여줍니다. 한 사람은 죽이기 위해 일생 동안 충분한 양의 배출량을 만들기 위해 단지 3.5명의 미국인이 필요한 반면 같은 일을 하기 위해 25명의 브라질인 또는 146명의 나이지리아인이 필요한다는 것을 발견했습니다. Okay, so looking at the graph here. Sorry, my Korean. Okay, so excess deaths per citizen's life. So one Saudi Arabian that would produce will kill, his emissions will kill 0.33 or 1/3 of a person. Okay, so whereas for America it's like 0.29, so effectively it takes like 3.5 Americans. So like there's 1 divided by 0.29. Or the world average is 0.08, so it takes, what's it, 12.8, I think. Okay, I hope you get the picture. Okay. Section D, we have readiness and wisdom are needed. Sacrifice. Okay, let's make some sacrifice for the children. And okay, the CO2 we produce is not just our car or our living, but all parts of the economy. We use the economy, we live in the economy. Okay, so this graph has shown the greenhouse emissions per sector. So we've got agriculture, forestry, land use. Okay, so it's producing food, livestock. Okay, so animals. It's like 5.8% of the total emissions of the world. We've got waste. We've got chemical industry, and the grey, that industry. Over here, we've got 5.2, and saying the rest is 73% is energy. It's got we've got energy used in industry, 24%, 24.2%. And we've got transport. There's cars and buses and trains. That's like 16%. Like road transport is only like 11.9%. We've got flying is almost like 2% by plane. Energy use in buildings, got 17.5%. So we've got commercial, that's 6.6, and residential, that's people's houses, is like 10.9%, almost 11%, 1/9 of the total energy. Okay, so we all use these things. So that's how, it's not just the energy I use myself, but it's also the things I buy and the cars I drive and the food I eat. This is the annual emissions by gigatons from different types of food. Okay, so we've got beef, cows, okay, sogogi. They produce 4.3 gigatons. That's for the whole world. Okay, and they got compared with Japan. Japan's emissions is 1.2. Well, that's quite a lot anyway. We've got cow's milk. If you drink milk, pork. So okay. Some things like this is like the total. We've got chicken, less. But eggs. Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. This is another way. Okay, so this is comparing different foods. Okay, so if they produce the same amount of calories, like 1,000 calories, the energy you get from your food, this is comparing the CO2 emissions of different foods. So that you have to note on the bottom axis is actually a logarithmic scale. So every unit is like 10 times. Okay, so in the line down the middle, we've got a banana. A banana, the amount of bananas you need to give you like 1,000 kilocalories energy, then we think the CO2 used for making that banana is like 1. What we choose. Okay, and then we compare that with other foods. So we can see like salmon is around like used like 10 times, whereas a beef burger. You like beef burger? that uses how much? It's like maybe 25, 30 times a banana. Okay, to get the same energy from a beef burger or a banana, the beef burger uses 30 times more energy. And then, and you've got meat-friendly burger, and then almonds. Almonds are very good. Okay, so like a banana uses almost like produces 10 times more CO2 for the same energy equivalent of almonds. So almonds is a lot better. Okay, you might wonder why animals produce so much CO2, because we know they need lots of food. They eat lots of plants, lots of grain to keep them alive, and almost like 50% of American farmland is produces food just for animals to eat. So it's very ineffective. And also, like Chinese people love pork. Okay, pig, gogi, and they're eating lots of those. So animals are a very expensive way of producing it. If you want to eat some meat, chicken is better than beef. And you also got rice down as well. And you've got the resources. So you can find my song on my channel here, which I call Shrek's Gospel. And you can see the classical music, the Liberate. And then if you want to sing it, okay, I'd really love to actually sing this with some people or get some people to record it. So you can, there's different parts there. If you want to practice singing, you've got the soprano, alto, tenor, bass part. And then I've got some of the references for things. Okay, I've got one thing about grammar structure, which I won't go into there. That's in Appendix 1. Okay, you can read that if you want. And then some articles from the Economist, but I think you can't read. I think you probably can read them, but there's also paywall, so you probably read it once. Okay, so there's some articles there where I got my charts from, and this is where I got that last one about the CO2 by industry from the Visual Capitalist. And then there's some articles about the excess mortality of carbon. Like excess mortality, explaining that on the wiki, and the original Nature article, which in lots of detail, and then easy reading is on the Guardian, which you can read, or the New York Times. I think the New York Times has a paywall, so you have to pay money to get that. I hope that you won't take my word as gospel, but be inspired to check out the facts for yourself. I've left a few links in the references and the video description as a starting point. I hope that it will inspire you to reflect on your own lifestyle and the climate-related policies of parties you may vote for and put into political office. In politics, there is a huge tension between the needs of today and the status quo versus the world 20 years or more later. Our children and our children will feel the consequences of our choices today. So again, I say thank you for spending time with me to consider this momentous issue. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something beneficial. And maybe I've encouraged you to write your own songs and create your own meaningful art to influence your group. Finishing on the words of the Song of Silence. Let's talk and listen more and reject the cancel silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs with voices that voices never share. No one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools, said I, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. So sing a new song and change the world for better. Thank you for listening.